I was invited for the family holidays. But when I arrived, they tossed me an apron. Babysit. We're going out, my sister said, and they laughed. Until I said, sure, but I'll need your signature first. For what? She asked. I handed her a folder, power of attorney transfer, already signed by Dad. 2 weeks later, I sold their main car. The next day, they knocked on my door for 30 minutes. I let them shout. Then I opened and said, I haven't been nice to them since that day. Not once. And I don't plan to start now. It wasn't always like this. I used to be the guy who dropped everything when they needed help. Helped my parents with bills more times than I can count. Lent my sister money when she just needed a little to get by. Took care of the paperwork when Dad's health got worse. I was dependable, responsible, the adult in the family who never made it about himself. But that day, that so-called family celebration changed everything. My sister called me a week before saying they were planning something special for Mom. Nothing big, just close family, and that I really should be there. She kept stressing how much Mom missed me. Guilt tripped me. Really said everyone was pitching in and that it wouldn't be the same without me. So I cleared my Saturday, canceled plans with my wife, picked up a good bottle of wine, and made the 3-hour drive out to their place. When I got there, the driveway was already full of cars. Shoes piled near the front door. I figured maybe they invited more people than they said, or maybe some friends dropped by. I walked in smiling, expecting hugs and warm welcomes. What I got was an apron. Someone literally threw it at me. My sister was already halfway to the backyard when she turned and said, "Sit with the kids. We're going for a walk." Everyone laughed. It wasn't light laughter either. It was that loud, ugly kind people do when they're not laughing with you. I stood there for a second, not saying anything. I looked around. My mom smiled like this was all adorable. My dad shrugged like this was just how it was. My cousins chuckled. No one thought this was weird. No one thought, hey, maybe Jack doesn't want to be treated like a glorified babysitter after driving all this way. I said, sure, but first I needed my sister's signature. She blinked. What for? I handed her the folder. She opened it and started reading. Her face dropped. Inside was a full power of attorney. Complete control over Dad's finances, assets, and yes, both vehicles. He had signed it last week without a second glance. Trusted me to handle his paper stuff like always. She looked up confused. I said nothing, just looked at her. That silence, that was years of swallowing, every slight, every fake thank you, every one-sided favor. All of it finally boiling over, but without a word. They didn't know what to say. I sat with the kids just like they wanted. 2 weeks later, I sold the good car, the Toyota Highlander they used for everything. I didn't even bother getting them a replacement. I listed it online, signed the title, and watched a stranger drive off in it. Clean and legal. The next day, they were at my front door before 9 a.m. They pounded on the door for 30 straight minutes. I didn't rush. I watched from the kitchen window, drank my coffee, took a long shower, let them feel ignored for once. Eventually, I opened the door. My sister's face was pure fury. Mom looked shocked. Dad actually looked hurt. None of that mattered anymore. What the hell is going on? My sister snapped. I told them I exercised my legal right. The car was mine to sell. Dad signed it over. Mom started crying. Said I didn't understand what I'd done. I told her I understood exactly. I understood that I wasn't family to them. I was a tool, a free service. The guy who gets handed an apron. You can use the spare car, I said. It still runs, kind of. I closed the door. That was the beginning. Since then, I've been polite, sure, but never nice. And if they thought that was the worst I had in store, they were in for a long, cold surprise. After the car incident, I gave them space. Not out of kindness, out of strategy. I knew they were waiting for me to cave, waiting for the apology, the explanation, the graveling. That's the pattern they were used to. I'd speak up, they'd act shocked, I'd feel guilty, and then I'd fix it all. But not this time. The silence from their end didn't last long. Within a week, I started hearing things. A friend of mine bumped into one of my cousins at a grocery store. She said, "Your buddy Jack's off the rails, huh? I heard he's trying to take the house." That was the version of the story they were spreading. Now I was the ungrateful son trying to rob his sick father. The way they told it. You think I was some corporate shark, not the guy who's been covering their mortgage behind the scenes for nearly a year. And still, I didn't say a word. I let them enjoy their drama. But I was watching everything. Their utilities were still tied to Dad's accounts. I had access to every bill, every late notice, every automatic payment I had quietly set up for them years ago. So, I made a few clicks, turned off autopay, removed my credit card info. Just like that, the system went back to default. Then I waited. Week 1, nothing. Week 2, I got the alert. Payment missed. Week 3, their electricity was shut off on a Friday afternoon. No power, no internet, no air conditioning. In June, they didn't even call me this time. Probably too proud. Instead, my sister posted some vague story online about people who pretend to be family. I laughed so hard I had to screenshot it. I was the one pretending. The next morning, though, they showed up again. Same routine, hammering on the door like they owned the place. I watched from upstairs, let them cook in the heat. After 30 minutes, they gave up and left. A few hours later, my phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "We have no power. Are you proud of yourself?" I replied, "Check the account. Dad's funds are exhausted. Nothing I can do." That was technically true. I had moved a large portion of Dad's idle money into a private account to keep it safe from them. It was still his legally, but I wasn't letting them burn through it with their usual chaos. Sunday night, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I picked up. It was my sister. No shouting this time. Her voice was flat. Said Mom was sleeping at a neighbor's house and Dad was too embarrassed to leave the porch. She asked quietly if I could turn the utilities back on, just for a few days. I told her I'd check into it sometime next week. Then I hung up. Monday morning, I got another notification. The overdue balance had been paid by cash in person. They used the old spare car to drive into town, stood in line at the utility office like everyone else. Imagine that. Meanwhile, I started dismantling everything they depended on. I pulled out of the family emergency fund. It had always been unofficial, just something I set up years ago so my parents and sister wouldn't go broke every time their lives spiraled. I didn't announce anything. I just stopped contributing. Within 2 months, the balance was drained. Dad's medications, I used to refill them automatically. That ended too. Now they need to call the pharmacy, check prices, deal with insurance, the whole mess I used to handle for them. By Thursday, my mom called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Said she didn't know what had happened to me, that this wasn't the son she raised. She started crying halfway through, saying she was scared of losing the family. I played it back later for my wife. She listened the whole way through and said, "Let them squirm. They need this." That voicemail was like fuel. I played it again the next morning while I ate breakfast. Then I forwarded it to a burner email address. I don't know why. I think I just wanted to save it like a trophy. The thing is, it still wasn't about money. It was about them realizing that I wasn't afraid of being the bad guy anymore. I wasn't going to fix everything. I wasn't going to ask for respect. I was going to demand it, even if I had to burn every bridge to get it. And believe me, I hadn't even touched the matches yet. After the utilities and the emergency fund, I expected some sort of truce attempt. Maybe a guilt trip from my mom. Maybe my dad calling with that worn-out voice he used whenever he wanted something. But nothing came. For a few days, they disappeared completely. I thought maybe they were regrouping, maybe trying to get one of the uncles involved to play mediator. Then, out of nowhere, my sister texted me about the family vacation. It was a trip we'd been doing every summer for the past 6 years. Rented cabin by the lake 3 nights, sometimes 4. I'd been the one booking it, paying the deposit, coordinating everyone's dates. My name was on everything. Her message read, "Can you just send us the details for the lake house? We'll head up Thursday like usual." No greeting, no apology, not even a question mark. I stared at that text for a solid minute before responding. I canceled the reservation. Her reply came instantly. "Why would you do that? We all go every year." I didn't even answer. I just sent a screenshot of the cancellation confirmation with the date and my name on it. Then I blocked her number. 2 hours later, I got a call from my mom's phone. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail, calmer this time, but still layered with that tired disappointment she always used when I didn't bend the way she wanted. She said I was tearing the family apart. I saved that one too. The thing they still didn't understand was that I wasn't punishing them out of spite. I was doing it because it was the only way they'd ever respect me. And if they couldn't do that, then they could learn to survive without me. A week later, my dad called from a landline. I guess the sales service got cut off temporarily. Probably missed the bill. He left a message asking if I'd help them refinance the house. I deleted it. My sister went back to posting online. Long-winded stories about how people with money use it to control others. Subtle jabs about toxic siblings. One post even had a picture of their old car and a caption about downgrading and simplifying like she was the one choosing hardship. Meanwhile, I kept things running smoothly on my end. My wife and I took a weekend trip to the mountains. She kept asking if I felt guilty at all. I told her the truth. I didn't. Not even a little. She just nodded and said, "Good. Because they would have destroyed you if you hadn't done this." The best part, some of the other relatives started noticing. An aunt called me, one I barely talked to, and said she heard from someone that things weren't great between me and the family. I said, "That's one way to put it." She asked if everything they were saying about me was true. I told her exactly what happened. Nothing more, nothing less. By the end of the call, she said, "Honestly, I'm on your side. You always did too much for them." And that's when it clicked. They weren't just losing me. They were losing the image they built for themselves over the years. The illusion that they were the center of this family, that they deserved everything just for existing. Now they were just 3 people with a barely running car, a leaking roof, and no backup plan. And I was just getting started. It had been weeks since I heard anything directly from them. They tried a few times. Calls from block numbers, vague emails, even a handwritten letter from my mom that arrived with no return address. I didn't respond to any of it. I thought maybe they finally understood that I was done, that I didn't owe them anything anymore. But no, some people don't learn until you spell it out in pain. It was a Thursday night. I had just finished cleaning up after dinner. My wife was curled up on the couch reading, the windows open, quiet music playing. We hadn't had an evening like that in years. No interruptions, no drama, just peace. Then came the knock. Slow, steady, deliberate. I checked the camera and there she was, my sister, standing on the porch with her arms crossed like she was expecting me to be the one feeling guilty. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. She walked in anyway. She didn't even sit. Just started talking like she'd been practicing the speech in her head. She said she was exhausted. Said she was sick of the tension. Said it was ridiculous that I'd cut off my own family over a joke. That I'd taken things too far. That I was hurting everyone just to make a point. "You need to stop this," she said. "This has gone beyond anything normal. We're supposed to be a family, Jack. You should be helping us. You have the money, the connections. You've always had more. So just help." That word should. She said it like it was law. Like I was born to serve them. No remorse. No reflection. Just entitlement coded in concern. I was about to say something when my wife walked into the room. She hadn't heard the whole conversation. But she didn't need to. She'd seen the years of subtle digs, of fake gratitude, of me covering their messes just to be dismissed again. My wife asked her one thing. "So after everything, you're still saying Jack owes you?" My sister rolled her eyes, said my wife didn't get it. Said this was between real family. And then without raising her voice, without saying a word more, my wife walked up to her, grabbed her by the hair and dragged her out the front door. Not roughly, not violently, just with this calm surgical finality that made it clear something had snapped. She pulled the door open, shoved my sister out onto the porch, and told her not to come back ever. Then she locked the door. I stood there watching, not shocked, not even surprised, just proud. I'd never seen my wife like that, but I knew where it came from. She had watched me bend over backwards for people who wouldn't lift a finger for me. She'd listened to me blame myself for not being good enough. She'd seen the weight they'd put on me and stayed quiet for years, waiting for me to be ready to fight back. Now she wasn't waiting anymore. We didn't talk much after that. She went back to her book like nothing had happened. I sat beside her in silence. And for the first time since this all began, I felt completely understood. The next day, my mom called 9 times. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail saying my sister had come home crying, that this wasn't how families behaved, that I had broken something we might never fix. She was right and I didn't care. Let them call. Let them spin the story however they wanted. Let them play the victims. The truth was, they needed me more than I ever needed them. And now they'd have to figure out what life looked like without me holding it all together. They could drive their beat-up car. They could chase overdue bills and watch summer slip by without the annual lake trip. They could go back to being regular people, the kind who don't have someone cleaning up their failures behind the scenes. And me, I had my peace. I had my wife. And I had finally learned that being the villain in someone else's story is a small price to pay for being the hero in your own. After that last night, I didn't just cut them off. I erased them from my daily life, blocked their numbers, muted their emails, scrubbed every trace of them from my contacts, and shared calendars. I didn't say anything dramatic, didn't post online, or make a grand statement. I just vanished from their world, at least. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. The silence on their end was deceptive at first. A few days of nothing, then a few more. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally understood the message. That the bridge was gone, not broken, gone, burned down. The river dried up beneath it. But the first real sign they hadn't changed came from my dad through someone else. A cousin I hadn't heard from in almost 2 years texted me out of nowhere. Said, "Uncle Dave, my dad was having trouble figuring out some new insurance paperwork. And that maybe if things weren't so tense you could help." I didn't even answer. Not because I couldn't be bothered, but because I knew what that meant. My dad didn't want to speak to me. He wanted something from me. Even now, after everything, the pattern hadn't changed. They weren't reaching out to reconnect. They were reaching out because their system was failing without me propping it up. Then came the voicemails. My mom again. Always the same pleading tone, asking why I was doing this, asking why I was punishing them, asking how I could let my father suffer. She never once asked what they had done. Never once acknowledged the years they laughed behind my back while using my generosity like it was part of their inheritance. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Instead, I focused on living. My wife and I went out more. We traveled for a weekend. No guilt attached. We hosted friends without wondering if my sister would show up uninvited, acting like nothing had happened. I picked up hobbies I hadn't touched in years. I stopped checking my phone before bed, but the reminders of them still came. Always subtle, always pathetic. One day, I saw their old car at the grocery store, the spare one I told them to use after I sold the good one. The hood was held down with a rope and there was duct tape on the side mirror. They used to mock that car when I drove it. Called it a junker. Now it was their family vehicle. Another time I ran into one of my dad's old friends. The guy looked uncomfortable even saying hello. Said he'd heard things weren't great between me and the family. I told him the truth. Short, simple, clear. Told him I got tired of being used. He didn't have much to say after that. Just nodded and said, "Can't blame you." But they still wouldn't stop. My sister sent an email about 2 weeks later. No apology, no ownership, just another attempt to act like this was all a misunderstanding that I was blowing out of proportion. She said she was willing to move past all of it and that I shouldn't hold grudges. Then she slipped it in at the end. "Maybe you could at least help Dad with the insurance stuff again since you've always been good at that." That was it. That one line told me everything I needed to know. They weren't sorry. They were uncomfortable. They didn't miss me. They missed what I did for them. They missed the free help, the silence they could count on, the brother-son puppet who never pushed back. I showed my wife the message. She didn't laugh this time. She said, "They're not going to stop unless you make it permanent." I already had. I archived the email. Then I logged into the shared cloud drive where I used to store family documents, tax files, legal forms, password spreadsheets. I deleted every file, changed every password. Then I locked the account. They could figure it out themselves like grown-ups. And the thing is, I wasn't doing it out of revenge anymore. I was doing it because I finally understood something they never did. Love without respect is just obligation in disguise. And I was done living under it. Let them call. Let them cry. Let them post cryptic online updates about how I changed. Let them fix their own problems and live in the world they built without me. And every time they picked up the phone and saw my name grayed out, every time they heard a voicemail that never got returned, every time they looked at that clunker of a car and remembered what they used to have, they'd remember who made that choice. They did. I just made sure it stuck. It's been almost half a year now. No contact. Not even a slipped word from a cousin or a half-hearted email from my mother. The silence between us grew its own shape. Not a wall. Walls keep people out. This was more like distance, open space, a void that couldn't be crossed. Not because I refused to build a bridge, but because they burned all the pieces long before I stepped away. I started sleeping better. I stopped keeping my phone within reach. I didn't realize how much I'd lived under the tension of that ringtone. Expecting something, fearing something, bracing for another guilt-wrenched request or sideways insult. When you spend years being the family fixer, even silence feels like you're doing something wrong. But after a while, that feeling stopped. The silence became normal, deserved even, and still they found new ways to try and remind me they existed. Started small. A cousin posted old photos on Facebook. One was from a lake trip 5 years ago. Me carrying the coolers, my sister holding nothing, smiling like she planned the whole thing. The comments were full of miss those days and so much has changed and one subtle jab. Some people forget who was really there. I didn't respond. Then one morning, a neighbor messaged me. She said she saw my dad and sister pushing their spare car down the street. It had died halfway out of their driveway. She laughed, said, "Karma's weird, huh?" and sent a blurry picture of them struggling with it. I didn't laugh. I saved the photo and didn't reply, but the big one came in March. A plain white envelope, no name, no return address. I thought it was junk until I opened it and felt the stiff edge of a photo inside. It was the 4 of us, me, my parents, my sister, from a birthday dinner about 10 years back. I remembered that night too clearly. I had driven 6 hours straight after work, paid for everything, was the last to eat because I was still setting up chairs when the food was served. I brought wine. They mocked the brand. I brought dessert. My sister said she was cutting sugar and called it thoughtless. Still, I smiled for the photo. And now here it was again. No note, no message, just a picture. I sat with it for a long time. Not because I missed them, but because I didn't. There was a time I would have clung to this as a reminder of what family meant. Now it just looked like proof. Proof of what I gave, what they took, and how much of myself I erased trying to belong in a space they never really made for me. When my wife got home, I handed it to her. She looked at it once, then slid it back into the envelope. No words. We didn't need them. That night, I burned it, dropped the whole thing into the fireplace, watched it blacken at the edges curl, collapse. I waited until it turned to ash before I walked away. Since then, there's been nothing. Not from them, not about them. But sometimes I still hear stories. An old friend ran into my mom at a pharmacy. Said she looked tired. Said she asked if anyone had heard from me, that she still cried sometimes in public. That dad looked like he was shrinking into himself. I thanked the friend but didn't ask for details. They made themselves helpless by choice. And now they were stuck in a world where no one was coming to fix it. They still had that old car. No backup plans. No silent ATM in the form of a good son. No emotional sponge to soak up their moods. Just each other and the weight of everything they used to leave on my shoulders. As for me, I rebuilt. The business grew. My wife and I took a real vacation. The kind where you don't check your phone once. I reconnected with people who knew me before. I was a support system. I stopped apologizing for my distance. People who understood stayed. People who didn't quietly left. I didn't chase anyone. I used to think you were stuck with family. That blood meant obligation. But blood is just biology. Loyalty is a choice. And I chose to finally be loyal to myself. So, If they ever show up again, if one day there's another knock at my door, I already know what I'll say. Nothing. Because I'm done explaining why I walked away from people who lit the match, handed it to me, and called it love. Update. They'll never admit it, but I know they feel the gap. The things I used to handle, paperwork, taxes, appointments, bills, those don't magically resolve themselves. They used to rely on my silence, my patience, my automatic forgiveness. Now they have to rely on each other, and I wonder how long that'll hold. Sometimes when I'm driving through town and pass a car like their old one, I catch myself glancing at the driver, wondering if it's them, stuck again, waiting on someone else to save the day. But it won't be me. It never will be again.